What's up, everybody? Welcome to Macro Talk. It's Tuesday, January the 21st, and I don't know if you can even hear me, or see me for that matter. If this thing goes off without a hitch, it will be a miracle. I've had to change some things around. We're talking about computers this week because it seems to be on the front of my mind. I had some computer issues last week, and it made me think maybe it was time to share some of this stuff with you guys and let you know a few of the things I've been thinking about. So we're going to be talking about computers in the sense that they are one of the most important tools that we use in macro photography, or any kind of photography. You can't do photography without computers these days. You need them to store your pictures, to catalog them, to edit them, to print them, to send them places, everything. You just use everything needs a computer. So when your computer is not functioning properly, bad things can happen. Why do I have one hair sticking up at the top of my head longer than any of the others? That's probably when my clipper broke. I had to get a new clipper this week. You don't care about that though, do you? I don't blame you. It's kind of beside the point. So we're going to be talking about computers, but first let me remind you, when Bud's away, the mouse will play, or something like that. Bud's away this weekend. I'm doing After Stack myself, and we're going to tackle the pen tool. So if you've ever wondered about the pen tool, want to know anything about it, want to come play, the invitation is in the blog post I put up yesterday, www.alanwallsphotography/blog/mac, and that's the address for the website, and you'll find the invitation to the After Stack in there. You'll also find it over on Patreon if that's more your style. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I love the pen tool. It's tremendous fun, very, very useful, very good for some kinds of selections, and it's a little bit difficult to learn how to use, but when you do, you'll love it. Oh, you can see my trash. That's nice. Is that any better? This camera on the Mac Studio is very weird. It zooms and follows you around the room, though I think I've got that feature turned off, so that's at least one good thing about it. If you have been waiting for your prize, if you won a prize during the competition from last month and it's not arrived yet, it's because, well, it hasn't been mailed yet, and that's because of this stuff that's going on with the computer. It's not a good excuse, but I've just been awfully busy. I'm getting them out tomorrow as soon as I find the addresses, which were on the other computer. Has anybody heard the new thing that Apple's come out with, the MacBook Paperweight? It's terribly expensive for a paperweight, but it really does hold your papers down very nicely. That's what prompted this discussion of computers this week. I destroyed my computer, essentially, at least for the time being. It's non-functional. It won't start. It doesn't follow commands. And what I want to do is very briefly go over that story so that you'll know why we're talking about this, and then we're going to talk today mostly about things you shouldn't do with your computer if you want it to stay a computer. If you want it to become a paperweight, do the opposite. But otherwise, this is just some stuff, basic stuff that we should all know, how not to brick your computer. We'll be a little more positive on Thursday when we're going to talk about best practices. It'll be following on from this. It'll be the same kind of discussion, but a little more positive. And I'm going to give you some hard and fast rules, not rules, suggestions that you might want to follow if you want to keep a computer for any period of time and not end up struggling with it or having problems. So, two sides of the same coin. And we'll be getting to that in just 1 second. If I look like I'm scrambling today, it's because I have a couple of jobs that have been backing up, And I've been trying to get them done this afternoon while getting ready for the live stream. But one of the most interesting ones was I've been photographing a fair amount of art for my friend Lonnie. He's an architect, a sculptor, and a painter. And he gave me a painting for Christmas and asked me to photograph it for him because he's making some cards out of it. And I thought I might show it to you because it's really very nice. I don't know why it's a pig, but it is a pig. It's an ink painting actually of a pig. Takes a lovely photograph too. If you would like to have one of those pigs on your wall, I'll tell you where you can buy one when he gets the prints out. Anyway, I'm photographing it, so yeah, that's why I'm scrambling. What else? Nothing else. Let's talk about computers. Let me start by telling you what happened. I was talking to a friend of mine on a Zoom call last week on Wednesday. And while we were talking, it suddenly occurred to me that there was a piece of video that I wanted to show him that I had shot through my microscope. And I had it all on a CF card, and I had it in this CF reader that you can't see because the cable's not long enough. Don't worry about it, it's just a card reader. And I had it connected to my MacBook Pro, which had admittedly given me one warning earlier in the day that it was getting a little low on disk space. Now I get this message a lot because I fill it up all the time with video content and all kinds of things that take up a lot of space. So I got the warning, didn't think too much of it because the clip I was downloading was really very small, just a few megabytes. So what I did was, while I was talking on the phone, talking on the Zoom call, I stuck the card in and started to download onto the computer. But what I did was, unbeknownst to myself, I had accidentally selected all of the video content on the CF card, not the clip that I wanted to show. And then I stopped paying attention to it. And over the next hour that we were talking, it continued to download stuff off the card, months of video content, until by some miraculously horrible turn of events, it managed to fill up my SSD, my solid state drive on the MacBook, with only a few kilobytes to spare. Now, if the video had been, if all of that content had been about a megabyte more, it wouldn't have completed the process, and it would have warned me and I would have stopped the download. But it was just exactly the right size to completely fill the drive. Now, that might not sound like a disaster at first, until you try to then empty the trash or move a file or take files off the hard drive. You have to have as much room as the size of the file that you're moving, or you can't move it. You can't delete it. You can't move it to another drive. It doesn't matter if you're in one of the recovery modes or in safe mode or any of the other modes that they have on these computers to get you out of trouble. And I have spent most of the last 6 days trying to do that, trying to get some of the content moved. The problem is there's so much on it, and it is so perfectly sized to fill the disk that I haven't been able to find a way. Neither have a couple of my hacker friends in Europe, neither have Apple. I've been to the Apple store in Chicago and they had no idea how to do it. They said it can't be done. I have even been in touch with the mothership in Cupertino because I have some friends up there and I've asked them what can be done. And it appears that through this one little oversight, when I wasn't paying attention, I have rendered this computer, or at least the contents of this computer, inaccessible. I can even look at the disk on my other computer, but I cannot move any of it. I cannot copy any of it or save any of it. So that prompted me to think, what else could we do to our computers as photographers that you might want to know about if you don't want to end up with a $5,000 paperweight. What's ultimately going to happen is I did back up most of my stuff, but there were some files that I work all the time and I make content all the time, and I have a whole bunch of photographs, video clips, recorded conversations and other things from just the last week that haven't been properly backed up. And as a result, I'm very probably going to lose them, the stuff that's only on this computer. And that is a bit of a disaster for me, because that's a week's work, maybe a week and a half's work. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about tonight when we talk about the must-not do's. I have 10 of these. Now, I am not a computer expert. I'm fairly competent at destroying them, but I'm by no means an expert. And what I am going to be telling you is advice that I've been given from people who are experts, and all of it is worth at least thinking about. If I tell you anything that you don't agree with, don't get too upset about it. Like I say, I'm not an expert. Some of you guys probably are. But and by all means, jump in the chat and let me know if anything I'm saying it doesn't jive with your view of reality on this. But I think these are all fairly safe things to avoid doing. Number one, and these are not in any particular order, do not rely on a single backup system. I don't. I have multiple backup systems. The trouble is, I do something else bad later on that makes them pretty useless some of the time. But don't rely on a single system. Follow the 3-2-1 backup rule. The 3-2-1 rule is 3 copies of your data on 2 different media types and 1 off-site. That's the 3, the 2, and the 1. But the important one is 3 copies of your data. I use Backblaze, which continually copies any new information on my computer and sends it to their server. So I have a constantly refreshing copy of everything. I also have Time Machine backups, which is an Apple thing. If you have Apple, you know about this. It's another continuous backup system. And I also archive stuff onto one of 8 terabyte drives I have on my desk. So I have lots of space and lots of copies. But you have to have that because drives fail. Drives get dropped. Drives get unplugged and get corrupted, and you end up without the data that's on them. So there are real risks if you're using just a cloud storage device or just an external device. You need 2 of them, at least 1 of them off-site, and at least 3 copies of the data. Okay. Hard disks, the kind of spinning disks that you can buy. What are mine? Seagates. I have, and Western Digital. I have 4 of each. They're all 8 terabyte, and they all have hard disks in them, spinning disks, which actually, by my understanding, are a better way to archive data. They're slower to retrieve data from, but they're more long-lasting than solid-state drives. But they do fail, and they're prone to wear and tear. And if they're moved or dropped, they can fail in an instant. So hardware failure is a risk of using these things. USB cables and ports break down all the time, as you know, and when that happens, you can get transfer disconnections which corrupt files, and when that happens, it's just a matter of time before you're going to lose some of the data. Your data is vulnerable if it's not being encrypted whenever you move it around. So external the kind of thing that I have, like Backblaze, can expose your information to being taken. they have a limited lifespan. I think the HDDs, the hard drives, the spinning disk drives, usually last only 3 to 5 years, is what I've read. 3 to 5 years is not a lot of time. And the solid state drives that everybody wants to move to, they are very dependent on how often you read and write from them. So if you're using them for caches, for example, they can get read and written to over and over again, and that will degrade their longevity. So the message here, and we're going to go into much more detail about this in the best practices, but you really need to check the health of your disks. Computers have a way for you to do this. You can find out if your disks, if the volumes and the partitions are all healthy, and if they're not, you can perform first aid on them all through your computer. On a Mac, it's dead simple using disk utility. In the PC world, they have other tools. I'll talk about them briefly. So the second do not do is ignore the health of your drives. This is really important. If I had taken 10 seconds to open disk utility and look at the drive on my laptop, I would have stopped what I was doing and started migrating big blocks of content off of this computer onto another drive. I'd have done it right there and then, but I didn't. I ignored the health of this very important drive. It's only a 2 terabyte drive, and these days that's not a lot for a macro photography because you have some big files and lots of them. There is a diagnostic system called Smart Diagnostics. I think it's mostly a PC thing, but it's self-monitoring, analysis and reporting technology. It's built into a lot of drives that you can buy, and it will monitor the health of your drive by looking at read-write errors and bad sectors and the temperature of the drive. And with a Mac, that's the technology that's used in disk utility for giving you basic overviews of what's going on with your drives. On Windows, I think there's something called Crystal Disk Info. I don't know. I haven't had a PC in a long time. But you can access that through the BIOS on your computer. Other monitoring tools, HDD Scan and GS Smart or G Smart Control, give detailed reports. That's not what we're going to talk about today. There are ways that you can interrogate your drives and find out how healthy they are. If you have a NAS, and we're going to be talking about network attached storage in just a minute, they almost always have disk health monitoring built in. Avoid the use, this is not a separate one, this is part of this one. Avoid using any drives that are old or failing. How do you know that a disk is old or failing? Well, that's a key question, isn't it? They make unusual noises sometimes. They make clicks and grinding sounds. I've had them do all kinds of things. They get slow. You may have one drive that just takes forever to move stuff off or for it to be read in your Finder, or it crashes or freezes during transfer of files. If there are corrupted files or missing files from a drive, these are all really good clues that you have a failing drive. Smart warnings would be another one. If the smart technology ends up having to reallocate parts of your disk or move data around, it will report that, and they're usually doing it because a sector has gone bad. So the trick is, when you have a disk that's going bad, these days they cost very little. 8 terabyte drives, when I bought my first one, it cost hundreds of dollars. The last one I bought cost under $200 for 8 terabytes. You can probably buy them in a dozen or 20 terabytes now. That's a lot of space for pictures. Okay, number 3. Do not store your data on your internal drive. There is a drive, usually these days, a solid state drive in your laptop, or there's probably a solid state drive in your desktop if you have a new one. These disks are not storage disks. We think of them that way because of the fact that they're called hard drives, but they are really for holding things like your operating system and your BIOS and your cache, where files can be temporarily held while you're working on them. It's where stuff goes temporarily while you're using it. You need something different to hold the data that is not actively being used. And you need something different again for holding stuff that you never use, that you're just trying to store. It's very, very important, though, that you remember the first rule, and that is that you don't use the SSD on your computer as a storage unit. These days, when you buy a computer with an SSD, it's often a very small SSD, maybe half a terabyte, which doesn't sound that small, but it is. And it's really enough to hold all of the temporary stuff that you need and your operating system, but not much more. I sometimes think if I had a drive like that, I might be less cavalier about letting stuff pile up. I'm terrible about when I'm working on a video, I'll have lots and lots of content that's part of the editing process, and I'll store it all temporarily on the laptop and then just not get around to moving it back off when I'm finished, and I'll start another video and another video and another, and next thing you know, half the video's taken up, half the drive is taken up with video content. A 10 gigabyte video segment that I release on YouTube has probably got 100 to 150 gigabytes of footage that went into it before it was edited, and all that will get stored on this computer if I'm not very, very careful. So don't store all your data on your internal drive. If you are a serious photographer, especially as a macro photographer, you're doing a lot of focus stacking, you have a lot of content, invest in a network attached storage, a NAS. These are really made for people with large photo libraries. I don't have one. I have never bought one, and it has simply been for the very basic reason that I couldn't afford them. They were very expensive. They're still pretty expensive because they contain a large number of drives to have an effective one, and they duplicate the data. It's copied to multiple different disks within the system, and it allows you to keep the SSD on your computer almost empty. I'll cover this again, but you should never ever have more than 80% of your drive full at any time. You need a bare minimum of 20% for it to function. Probably a good bit less than that if you're doing a lot of intensive type editing work or video work, or using any of the more advanced editing programs that take up a lot of compute on your machine. So that is definitely something to look at. They come now in a wider variety of prices. I've seen some a little more reasonable. You can actually put them together yourself, and there's actually a fairly big market in reselling used network attached storage devices, though I would feel a little odd about buying a used storage device. Kind of makes you wonder why they sold it, you know. Anyway, the benefits of having network attached storage is it's redundant. You have multiple copies. You can have like a RAID system, which mirrors data across multiple drives, and if one drive fails, which it eventually will, you'll have it on other drives too, so you don't lose data. You can also use these things to access your data remotely, as if you're basically running your own cloud, and you can get to the data from wherever you want. You can automate them so they do backups and set them up like that. and they're scalable. You can just add more drives as you need more space. And they don't use up much power. They sit on your desk, and they're wonderful. I mean, having one of those instead of 8 hard drives would be a good improvement for me. But you know, there's a logical fallacy called sunk cost fallacy. It's where you've spent so much money on hard drives that you can't see yourself throwing them away to get a NAS, and that's why I don't have one. All right. Number 4, do not put off software updates, operating system updates on your computer. This is important. The risks of delaying the upgrade of your, and now I'm not saying you do it the first day they release it, but I'll get to that in a minute. But don't delay it and delay it and delay it until there are 4 operating systems that have come out since you last updated. You need to understand that there's a balance between the stability of the upgrade that they've released, in other words, waiting until other people have found all the bugs and they've fixed it, and getting it on your computer in enough time to do you some good. When you don't update your software, and this also includes software releases for the programs you use, not just the operating system, but when you don't do that, you can create security vulnerabilities. You can make it easier for people to break into your computer. You can create security holes that hackers can get in, because that's just, well, I don't know enough about it. I talked to somebody this weekend about it, and it was all gobbledygook. The thing is, the updates that your software comes with usually include security patches, and they are made to block these deficiencies or these access points that a malicious individual might find. Also, your computer gets less and less effective at repelling ransomware and malware as the operating system gets older, especially if there's a new one that they're focusing their attention on. A malware attack can lock you out. You can have all of your data on your computer and lose every bit of it with a malware attack. So you need to take those things seriously. Compatibility becomes an issue. If your software has been updated and you haven't updated it, then oftentimes software programs that you use are being adjusted to work with the new operating system. And if you don't have it, or if you don't have the updates, then some of your software programs will stop working. And this happens quite a bit with Apple computers because they tend to make pretty big changes in some of their stuff. So be careful that you don't end up locked out of Lightroom or Photoshop or your focus stacking software because you haven't updated your software. Hardware drivers can also get left by the wayside if you're not keeping up with updates. Oftentimes when new stuff is released, when updates are released, they come with increased stability and improved performance. That's the idea. That's what they're trying to do. And if you don't update your operating system, you can't take advantage of those performance improvements. Of course, like I say, don't be the first person to do it, because you might find bugs that they hadn't noticed before. So let somebody else do that. Energy optimization. A computer tends not to be as effective in managing power consumption when its operating system is out of date. Now, I don't know why that would be, but I've read it in enough places that it would worry me, especially with laptops. They have a battery conditioning system in them that takes care of how they're charged and everything. So I can see how it might impact it. You can often lose features as well. You hear people talking about the cool stuff they're doing with their computer, and you're wondering, well, mine doesn't do that. Why is that? It's probably because you haven't updated in 15 years. But yeah, New features are added all the time. If you don't want to miss out on them, you need to stay up to date. iCloud, which is a Mac thing, or OneDrive, which is a Windows thing, often require that you update your software so that you can continue to use those services. And if you delay too long, this is mostly a problem with Windows, but they can force you to update, and it never happens at a good time. So don't leave it so long that the computer's going to get upset with you. And I guess if you leave it long enough, ultimately the computer company will phase it out, and they won't even support it. But my goodness, if you've got one that's that old, you're in a world of hurt. A couple of things that you can do, and I'll talk about this more on Thursday, to decrease the risks that are associated with updating your software. If you're hesitant about it because you've heard horror stories about problems people have with it, wait until a few people have done it, a few million people have done it, and check the feedback. See what people are saying about it. Back up your system before you do it. Always back up your system. Make sure that everything is up to date and backed up before you try to add an update. And update at a convenient time, in the middle of the night. Start it and go to bed or something, and just give it time to do its thing. Don't sit there and rush it along, because you run the risk of stopping it before it's finished. And if you're if you're a PC person, then you probably need to read the notes that come with the update, because they tell you all kinds of useful stuff about it. I don't think Apple tells you much about it, though. All right, number 5. That's not 5, that's 4. That's 5. Don't use pirated software, grey market software, unverified software. Anything that sounds dodgy, don't put it on your computer. The risks of getting malware and having compatibility issues and losing access to updates and everything just goes through the roof if you're using dodgy software. Oftentimes the software is developed and sold just to get you to put it on your computer so that they can get into your computer. The bad guys, that is. So make sure that your software is coming from a verifiable, secure source. Adobe, Lightroom and Photoshop, they're about as safe as you can get. And I'm sure there are people would disagree, but I have had no problems. Affinity is another one from by Serif. They're trusted, and people who don't want to use Adobe often will gravitate towards that. DxO, the Nick collection, Photolab, they're all reliable, trusted software sites. Capture One, Helicon, Zerine, Topaz. These all have great reputations. They're huge companies, and they give you just about everything you're going to need for your photography safely. Don't ignore the hardware. If you're buying a NAS, for example, get it from B&H or Adorama or KEH, MPB if you want a used one, if not that, go to a local dealer that sells certified Canon, Nikon, Sony, stuff like that, and make sure you're getting authentic stuff. Be very, very careful about grey market and other potentially dodgy hardware, because once you get that, you're pretty much done. If there's a problem with it, that they won't back it up. Some other plugins and add-ons that I think people rely on, and for good reason, are things like the Nick collection that I talked about from DxO, and Luminar is one. I've got Luminar on my computer, and I don't use it very much. It's from Skylum, but they have a good reputation. And On One Photo Raw is another one. There are lots of ways that you can improve the management of your data and keep your computer healthy, that we'll talk about on Thursday. But sticking with vendors that you trust, and for that matter, educational resources that you trust. There's a lot of garbage on the internet that can have you do some very dangerous things with your data in your computer if you're not very careful. So rely on things like Creative Live. You may have heard of lynda.com. It's LinkedIn Learning. These are really high quality platforms for learning. YouTube, of course. Me, you can rely on me. Just avoid channels that just pop up out of nowhere and have one of those computerized voices telling you to do stuff to your computer and your data, because it seldom will work out very well. Avoid websites that just pop up offering free versions of stuff. It usually means it's been pirated, and oftentimes it's been manipulated, and installing software that you're buying for 3 cents instead of $300 probably isn't going to be the real thing, and you will probably end up regretting it. eBay, less so Amazon, but if you don't have verified reviews for a particular software package, I would avoid buying it and putting it on your computer. Go with something reliable, and just never buy stuff off the torrent websites where they offer software sources that don't look authentic and don't have any of the usual printing on them that would lead you to believe it was true. Yeah, just avoid that stuff. Number 6, organizing and naming your files from the get-go will reduce the likelihood that you are going to do something stupid with it, like throw it away, which I do all the time. If you have a chaotic management of your file system, like I kind of do in some parts, then there are all kinds of bad things that can happen. First of all, you waste a ton of time looking for stuff. Now, all of my content that is related to video content, which is a lot of it, or blog content, all of that is very meticulously organized, and I can go straight to it. I know where it is. When I take pictures that are for upcoming videos, I put them in a certain place. I know where they are on the computer, and they're filed by date, so I can go straight to it. It's when I'm just out there doing photography that I can end up with a bit of a mess in all the other places that I store it. So I waste time looking for things, and sometimes I can waste a lot of time when I get it in my head I have to find that photograph. If you have your file system in such a mess and your naming has been so slapdash, you are almost certainly going to end up destroying data that you would absolutely not want to throw away. If your files are poorly named, poorly organized, it's only a matter of time before you end up throwing them away. And there's another thing that you can do. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but you can also end up with multiple copies of the same picture. I do this all the time. I can't be sure that it's in one location, so I end up making a copy of it, and before you know it, I've got copies of the same photograph filling up space all over. It's just good not to do that. It's almost as irritating as deleting stuff by mistake. Just getting your folders all mixed up and not knowing, for example, that you should never move folders. If you use Adobe, you should never move them outside of the Lightroom environment. If you do that, Lightroom loses them. Well, you can find them if you tell Lightroom where they are, but a year from now or a week from now, you won't remember where they are. If you move stuff around outside of Lightroom, it will cause these exclamation marks in Lightroom that say, yeah, I've got the thumbnail of that picture, but I have no idea where the picture is. And neither do you, because you've got 8 terabyte drives on your desk, and you know it's in one of those. That is a needle in a haystack. No, it's much smaller than a needle. It's a couple of bytes in a haystack. Don't do that. Keep them named, know what they are, know where they are. Take the time up front. You'll be glad you did. I know I would be glad if I did. This is a do what I say, not what I do thing. You understand. A couple of tips that I'm going to pass on to you. By having a good, clear, and methodical way of naming, all of these problems will significantly go away. But if you always include the date, subject, anything that will help you identify, and use the same consistent naming scheme for your files and folders, then it'll make it so much easier to find. And there is a trick of using underscores instead of dashes in the names of these things, to avoid compatibility issues. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. Like, sometime I'll take the time. In fact, I'll probably do it when Lester comes back on to talk about how bad my filing system is. I might show it to you because I don't think it's that bad. Everything, all of my files are named with names that make perfect sense. I have my animals, and insects is under that, and then I have all the different families of insects, and then under that particular genera if I have lots of pictures of the same genus. So I know exactly where to go to find pictures of insects. Less so with my landscapes, but I know where to find them. So always using the same system helps. All right, have you ever wondered how a Mac and a PC differ other than cost, which I guess they don't differ as much as they used to? Macs use a simpler, I guess it's simpler, Unix-based system that the folders are easier to manage, I think, and it's just the architecture of the folder system. PCs are, you can customize them more. You can do a lot of things on a PC you can't do on a Mac, but if you don't have discipline in your file naming and organizing, they can easily get lost if you're fiddling around with the storage system. Search in Mac is really easy if you use something like the Spotlight feature. That's the magnifying glass in the top right hand corner. And File Explorer, if they still have that on PCs, is pretty good for finding stuff, but it's quite a bit slower, I find. I mean, it finds a lot more stuff that you don't necessarily want. File compatibility is important. Mac uses HFS and APFS. That's Apple, what is it? What's APFS? I used to know this. Apple something file system. There's a surprise. HFS was H file system. What would H be? Hierarchical file system. But the PCs don't use any of that. They use, what do they use? Does anybody know? I used to know. I've forgotten. I didn't write it down. Oh, it's the New Technology File System, NTFS. You don't care about this, do you? Well, they're different. They are different. I think they're getting more and more aligned in terms of how these things work. The few times I've used a PC lately, it feels a lot more like a different kind of Mac than it used to. It used to be a lot harder to find your way around, but these days Macs just really use the APFS format. As far as I know, that's pretty much all I use. I never see anything else. I think most SSDs are optimized for APFS, but snapshots, that's a cool thing. When the computer wants to save a chunk of, like a snapshot of what's going on your drive, it will take a read-only copy. That means you can't write to it. All you can do is read it or use it as an input, and it saves it on your hard drive. And this was one of the things I tried over the weekend, was to dig out all the snapshots the computer had stored and throw them away, because they're often not very useful after you're through using them. So that's a very cool thing that I don't think I don't think PCs do that. They've probably got something similar though. I couldn't throw the snapshots away because, you guessed it, there wasn't enough space to do that. On Apples, you can actually share space on a drive. Segments of it can be used by different partitions. Don't ask me how. That's also very weird. But a single partition can be shared by different programs. Anyway, seems to be faster and more efficient. I love my Apple, or loved my Apple at one time. Yeah. Everybody who's got a PC, I'm going to let you chime in the chat and tell me why PCs are better than Apple. I love the fact that 99% of the time you can just turn it on and it works. That makes it easier for me to do a couple of things, to work with it beyond my capabilities, but also to get complacent and then let stuff happen like happened last week. So pros and cons. The Apple system does have Time Machine, which I absolutely love. It's kind of like file history on a PC, but it's really well organized, and the few times I've had to use a Time Machine backup, it's been very, very handy. So I like that. Anyway, number 7, don't skimp on antivirus and security software. Now, this I'm sure is going to stir a lot of people up. There are all kinds of threats out there. You can corrupt your files, you can have a phishing attack, or ransomware can get on your computer. And there are ways that we can secure our systems. Things like Bitdefender for PCs. I've heard great things about that. Highly recommended. And for Mac users, I think most of the security is built in on Macs. But you know, I've been reading articles lately that there are some malware threats out there. I use Malwarebytes, but there are other programs that you can add on your Mac that will give you added protection. I've heard there's some pretty ugly malware attacks out there that are targeting Macs. So I like I said, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but I think that as much time as I spend online, as important as my work is to me online, I will probably look at whatever ends up happening to this computer. I'll look at probably adding an extra layer of security. Maybe just use Malwarebytes a little more actively. But I think any computer that you have, it's worth looking into what's available for antivirus and anti-malware software. Number 8. Don't overload your computer. Now that doesn't really mean fill it up with data like I did, though you know that's obviously one of the primary risks. But I'm talking about don't put too much strain on your computer. I am really bad for running like 6 or 7 parallel instances of Xerene at the same time. I'll open up Xerene and start a stack, and then open up another instance of Xerene on the same computer and start another stack. And this all happened, well, I used to do it on my laptop, but when I got the Mac Studio, I went nuts with it, and I'd have 7 or 8 of these things running. I don't know why that's bad for a computer, but apparently it is. And it just increases the chances that you're going to have unanticipated complications going on. It's best to let your computer hum along without too much unnecessary load on it. So maybe not having 53 apps open and running at the same time is not a bad idea. Certainly if you notice your computer's performance slowing down, or if you're losing data, or you're having things act funky or close on their own when you're trying to work with them, it's probably because you're overstressing the system with too many things operating. There are some strategies for optimizing how stacking software, Photoshop, Lightroom, all these things operate on your computer. They are part of the best practices I'm going to talk about on Thursday. Number 9, are we on 9 already? Yeah. don't assume that removable storage is a safe way to handle data, to store data. It's not. These cards are fragile. It doesn't take much to mess up the physical case that the thing is in. It's just a tiny little slip of magnetic material in there that's holding these pictures, and sometimes I've dropped them on the floor and had them just pop open. And you can also put them in the wrong camera and have the formatting go wonky on you. And I have lost data on cards. They are susceptible to environmental conditions that will, if they get wet or if they get hot or if they, if you melt them, there are problems getting your data back. So it's a very good idea to when you take pictures on a card, as soon as you're done with that session, get the pictures off the card. That's a temporary storage solution. For macro photographers, you might want to consider tethering and skipping a card altogether, going straight to your computer. But certainly, you're going to be risking a lot of things by using your cards as a primary holding tank for pictures. What will happen is, I don't have mine out. I reorganized my desk. I cleaned up the whole office after the computer blew up as a punishment. But anyway, if you have boxes of discs like I do, you very quickly will forget what shoot you shot that card on. And you've got 15 cards, and you can very, very easily pull the wrong card out, stick it in your camera and format it and lose hours of work. Unfortunately, I've done that a whole bunch of times too. And if you're a Klaus Gilloy and you're going out there to shoot these massive stacks, and you're shooting tons of them, and you're using pockets full of cards, it would seem a very high risk for ultimately accidentally erasing some of those without knowing that you've done it. I actually number my SD cards when I buy, for example, compact CF compact something or other flash cards. I letter them. When I buy the cards for my D850, I number them, and I use them in sequence. So when I take out number 3, I put in number 4, and that way I know if I have a card that is out of sequence, it's probably not been downloaded. So anyway, think about it. Don't ignore power management and cooling of your computer, your NAS, your camera, anywhere where data is stored. Don't ignore the problems that come with wonky power situations or environmental states that change. The risks of power surges, for example, in wiping a drive are very, very real. The risks of a mishandled battery overheating your camera, same thing. There are so many creative ways that you can destroy data on a storage device. I thought it would be worth mentioning a couple of them, like impact, dropping disks. They will break. You can lose data that way. If your disk gets hot, you leave the camera in the car while you run inside to buy whatever you're buying. You come back out and your camera's now at the same temperature as the inside of your car, which in the summer here is probably around 20 degrees. Anywhere else it might be around 100 degrees, and your camera gets that hot. That's a problem. They're not designed to handle a lot of heat. The external, excessive heat on these cards can cause the components to literally degrade, to the plastic to soften and change shape, that type of thing. You just don't need to get these drives boiling hot. Oftentimes when a drive gets hot, it'll throttle down and it'll degrade performance to keep the drive alive. You'll know this if you've ever had a MacBook, for example, where the fans run all the time. It's trying to keep these delicate electronics alive. So you get performance issues. Inevitably, the lifetime of the useful lifetime of that media, that card or that disk, is shortened whenever you get the thing extremely hot. It just shortens the lifespan. If you bear that in mind and you treat your photography media like you treat your 3-month-old infant, and you don't leave it in a hot car, you don't throw yeah, well, you don't do anything that might damage the infant. You don't do that with your cards either. Active cooling, if you live in a super hot place or a super humid place, keeping your storage medium away from the elements is probably worth it if you want them to last. Monitoring the temperature, most of the tools I talked about earlier, those smart tools, will monitor the temperature of your drive, and it's worth paying attention to that too. Moisture and humidity, this stuff absolutely kills drives because it causes corrosion. So do you take your hard drives into the shower with you? I used to. I don't do that anymore because of corrosion. So avoiding that type of thing will usually cut down on the risk of you having electrical faults and failures from corrosion and what do you call it? The lining of the wires getting rotted off, that type of thing. Short circuits. You get enough electronics wet enough, and you're gonna end up with a short circuit. And from all I've been told, a short circuit inside a hard drive is a bad thing. Avoid it at all costs. Mold, of course, whenever any photography equipment gets wet, just start counting to 10, because by the time you get to 9, it'll have mold growing in it. And I need to suggest to you that maybe having mold inside your hard drive is a bad thing? No, I didn't think I did. Okay, so be careful with that. Keep your stuff, when you're not using it, in temperature and humidity controlled. I have large boxes that have cigar humidor hygrometers embedded in the top of them, and I fill them with those dry packs, and that's where all my lenses and camera bodies get stuck, and anything really that I don't want to rot, because I lived in a very hot, humid place. Of course, I don't do that now. I live in a freezer, and you don't have to worry about it quite as much. But control the humidity. It's easy to do. Desiccants, that's what I was trying to think of, those granules that absorb the water. You can even recharge those things. Dust and debris. Keeping stuff clean, keeping particles away from drives. You'd be amazed how dust and debris will get inside a drive if you don't take care of it and keep it clean. All you need is one little grain of dust getting scratched back and forth across your hard disk, and you'll have problems. So I don't have any dust covers, but I try to avoid direct air blowing on them to force air into them, and they do have fans that extract it. Avoid physical shocks at all costs. These things are slick and slippery, these hard drives. Why don't they put rough surfaces on them? I don't know. But when I pick up 4 of them at a time to move them, the ones in the middle will fall out. So you probably want to avoid that. They don't do well when they bounce on the floor or the table. I've broken a couple like that. I should pick them up one at a time. Note to self, pick up these things one at a time. But yeah, the HDDs in particular that have little stylets that whip around the discs, you drop one of those and that thing will just fall off. Who knows? They do make some hard drives, not the big ones, but the little ones that come in shock-proof boxes. Yeah, probably better to just not plan on dropping them, even if they're in a shock-proof box. Never move them while they're running. if you can hear the whirring of the motor going, don't move them, and definitely don't put them on their side or anything like that. That just would create a whole new set of forces in there that could upset the things. Avoid magnetic fields, which means you have to leave the earth if you have any of these things, but strong magnetic fields. You don't take hard drives in the shower, and you don't take them when you go for an MRI. Remember that, because magnetism, it doesn't affect SSDs, but God knows what it would do to a an HDD to put it in a MRI machine. My son installs MRI machines, and he even told me not to take my camera in there. Why would I take my camera in there? I don't know. Power surges, power outages. Sudden loss of power can corrupt or damage files. You need to know that. So we'll talk about it on Thursday, but have some kind of an always on power battery type thing. What do they call it? APS. Uninterruptible, well, that would be UPS. Uninterruptible power supply, UPS. What's an APS? Don't worry about it. But anyway, a surge protector is part of the story, but also having a battery attached to it is even safer. It doesn't get you out of lightning strikes, though, so don't hold your hard drives up in rainstorms, because that's moisture and electricity, probably magnetism too. So that's it. I'm going to talk a lot more about storage on Thursday, and about some best practices of how to set up a workable but useful and safe way to store your data. And if the talk's good enough, I might start doing some of it. I have deliberately not been reading the messages tonight because I have a feeling some of them are going to be hateful. You always open yourself up to a little bit of attack when you do something as dumb as I did with this computer, but go easy on me. I'm still suffering. That's it. We're out of time. It is right at 9 o'clock. I think we covered a lot. Thursday's going to be fun. It's going to be positive. Best practices, how to protect your data, how to just keep your computer humming along as you take pictures. You like that picture on my television? That's through my microscope. It's a ruler, but it's very crisp, nice picture. Very happy with that. Okay, I'm gone. I've got work to do and a pig to photograph. So I wish you all a good evening. I will read these notes, and I will respond to them on Thursday. Zeno, I was supposed to respond to you today because you said something at the beginning that I meant to answer. I won't have time to do it today. But next time we talk, could having your hard drive partitioned operating system from storage have saved your hard drive? It is partitioned. The operating system is on a separate partition that Apple makes. You can't get into it. I filled up the rest of it. There's no way to remove that partition, though we tried. Have a great evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. And I'll be less fraught come Thursday. Have a good day.